The Joe Rogan Experience.
You know, there was two moments where I was like, this is a real opportunity for us to come together. And one of them was the moment the lockdown happened. It felt to me very similar to right after 9/11, where everybody was confronted with their own mortality. Like, holy shit, like we might be on the verge of a pandemic, like in a movie, where a lot of the people we know die. And here we have to be kind to each other. We have to be. This is what's important. Family's important. And I remember thinking, I've never been closer to my family, never been closer to my friends. We were calling each other all the time. It was like there was real hope in that. I was like, if we get through this, we're gonna be tighter. We're gonna know what means something, what counts. Fuck stand-up comedy. Fuck everything else, man. What's important is love and friendship. Then it started to get angry. And it only took like 3 or 4 weeks where people started getting, like, they were scared. So people started getting shittier with each other online. And then I basically swore off Twitter. Yep. I was like, this is just too toxic and too hostile. The second moment where I thought we had the opportunity to come together was George Floyd. So George Floyd died. And all of a sudden, you have these Black Lives Matter protests, and I'm like, maybe we can finally make a dent on racism. Maybe we can finally make a dent in police brutality. Maybe this is a moment where we can come together and realize what's important. It's community, solidarity, that we're all in this together. Like, this is crazy. And then the cops need to be reformed. Like, they can't live like, and maybe we should take into account PTSD. Maybe we should take into account the fact that these fucking guys are pulling up on people every day that might shoot them in the face. They might never be able to see their family and their kids. Let's rework this. Let's think this shit through.
Yeah.
Nope. And then chaos. And then all of a sudden it became like what we saw yesterday, where they're breaking into Amazon Go in Seattle. Like, that fucking guy owns the Washington Post. He owns the most left-wing newspaper in America. And you're like, not good enough.
Well, you saw they set up a fake guillotine outside of Bezos' house in Washington, D.C.
It's insane.
And it's madness.
He's too rich.
I totally agree with you, by the way. Like, when COVID happened, I thought, I can't really see how we're going to split in partisan fashion over this thing.
Right.
Like, everybody wants to live, and everybody would also like to eventually get back to regular life. And the better we can live, the better we can get back to regular life. So it seems like, okay, we're on board. When it came to the lockdowns, the original lockdowns, I was like, okay, I'm on board. You know, I'm taking this thing really seriously. I've got parents in their 60s. I feel like, you know, I'm in good health. I'm fairly young. I'm 36. But for my parents, I don't want my parents getting this thing. And so we're still taking this thing real seriously. I mean, I'm still wearing a mask around to public places, and I think people should. I think that's a responsible thing to do. But it immediately turned into, who can we blame for this? Who can we blame? Who's doing it wrong? And it seems like there were only like a couple of things that you really can do that are obviously wrong. Like, nobody has a good solution on this thing. Okay, it ravaged Italy. It ravaged Spain. It ravaged New York. Like, there are a couple things you shouldn't do. Don't take the olds and send them back into the nursing homes with COVID, right? I mean, that's like an obvious one. But beyond that, like, just staying away from each other and socially distancing and wearing, like, this is all kind of commonsensical stuff that people have known since the flu pandemic of 1918. Like, nothing has really changed. And yet it immediately turned into, who can we blame? Who's to blame for all these dead people? Maybe it's Ron DeSantis, or maybe it's Cuomo. Like, who can we blame? So that was terrible. And then on the Floyd stuff, I had the same feelings. Like, I don't know a single human being who watched that tape and didn't think, okay, that guy deserves to go to jail. Chauvin, right? The officer in that case, in the George Floyd case.
Who didn't think that? Yeah.
Everyone I know.
Everybody thought
every
that.
single person was like, yeah, that's real bad. Like, cops. Like, I know tons of cops. I'm friendly with tons of cops. And not one of them was like, yeah, that's good police procedure. I'm glad he did that. Like, no one thought that. And so when people are like, okay, well, we're going to look at police brutality, maybe we'll take a look at qualified immunity, maybe we'll take a look at police unions and the kind of restrictive covenants that they have with the cities, and how we make sure that everybody knows who the bad cops are so they can't get hired at different places. Like, all those are solutions. But it quickly turned from, well, we don't want to talk about solutions. Solutions are a bad idea. What we need to do is we need to shout about everything we can possibly imagine all at once. And you know what? Instead, let's have a conversation about, like, was George Washington a bad guy? Let's have a conversation instead about, like, just completely defunding the police. We want to have, like, a responsible conversation about things that make sense. We'll talk about, like, what if we just got rid of the police?
How crazy is that discussion? That discussion, when people were really saying defund the police, I'm like, cooler heads will prevail. But they're going to realize. And I think they're realizing it now in New York City. I mean, New York City has had record crime, record homicides.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? De Blasio is, I mean, I would have never imagined I would look at Garcetti and go, well, he's better.
That's exactly exactly right.
I look at Garcetti and I look at de Blasio. I'm like, Garcetti, I'll have him over to my house for dinner. He's way better
Oh, yeah,
than
that
de
weird
Blasio. De
giant
Blasio is
groundhog murderer.
so weird. He's so. You can have protests, but only Black Lives Matter protests.
That one, that was a solid. That may have been the moment when I realized that we were all effed. Right? It was the moment when, like, we're in the middle of a global pandemic with hundreds of thousands of people dead, and an entire swath of our media and health elites just decided randomly that if you were protesting against lockdown, you were very bad, right? Then you were a racist and you were going to get people killed and you should wear a mask. And I was like, well, if you're I sort of agree with the mask thing. Like, yeah, okay. And then you get millions of people in the streets yelling at each other and breathing on each other and spitting on each other. And you got health professionals on TV being like, well, racism is a public health threat. I guess that you can do that now. It's like, well, what the? I know people who died in the hospital of COVID and their family could not visit them.
Yes.
Like, they literally died alone in the hospital of COVID and family could not visit them. And you're telling me that it's deeply important that we have, like, dance lines. This was stuff happening at rallies, like dance lines in the streets in New York to fight racism. That's deeply important. But a daughter being able to visit her dad before he dies, that's not important. Come on, what bullshit?
I am for your freedom to protest. I'm 100% for your freedom to protest. I'm also for your freedom to go to the gym. I'm also for your freedom to go to a comedy club if you so choose. I'm for your freedom to go to a restaurant. Look, they figured out how to do restaurants in a lot of places. The servers wear masks, and many of them wear face shields. You distance the tables apart from each other. You do temperature checks. You take people's names and addresses down when they enter so that if anybody gets sick, if there's any sort of... And they've been able to do this.
No, this is right. The vectors of transmission are typically closed areas, people in solid proximity with each other for long periods of time.
Yes.
Right. That's the stuff where people are getting this stuff. And I trust most Americans not, like, some Americans can be dumbasses. Some people are just dumbasses.
Oh, there's a lot of videos. I don't know if you watch YouTube, but there's plenty of Karens out there. How sad is it if your name is Karen and you're a good person? All the good Karens out there.
You're toast.
I'm sorry, ladies. I'm really sorry.
But it's like this is I made this point online. I got shellacked for it, but I was pointing out that most Americans are wearing masks right now. By polling data, 59% of Americans say that they always wear a mask when they leave the house. And if you look at the map of mask wearing, across the board, in the places where there are the most cases, people are wearing masks. That's not, I wasn't saying masks don't work. I wear a mask. I think that the evidence shows that they do something. We don't know that they're not, like, full protective. The cloth masks are not as effective as surgical masks, which are not as effective as N95s. But wear a mask, good. The point that I was making is people are acting in fairly rational fashion, meaning if you think COVID is, like, around you, you're wearing a mask and you're socially distancing. So this idea that Gavin Newsom knows best how you ought to live your life, like, I got some trouble with that, especially because California saw the same uptick as Texas and Florida, and California never opened. I mean, we've been here the whole time. California never really opened.
Well, we were doing pretty good up until the protests.
Yeah, that's
Everything
true.
seemed like it was on an uptick. The Comedy Store was talking to them about becoming an essential business and opening up, because they had opened up bars and they had opened up restaurants. And they didn't really have a designation for comedy clubs. They sort of talked about it as a live performance venue, but then that puts comedy clubs at the same place as the Staples Center, which sounds crazy, right?
Right.
So they're like, listen, we can do this. We can just have half capacity, temperature checks, do it right. They're doing it right in a lot of places all over the country. We can do this. The audience has to wear masks. This is totally doable. And so they were right about to do that. And then this other thing is, we were trying to figure out, like, is it protests only? I think it's bars too.
Yeah.
The thing about bars is close talk. People are
and
drunk.
loud talk,
Yeah, they're drunk and they're on top of each other. I think bars probably had a significant uptick.
Right, lots of singing, lots of vocalizing. Right, churches and synagogues were a main vector for this. Yeah, I mean, but again, these are all things that are fairly commonsensical and we can agree on, and yet we're beating the hell out of each other over this stuff. And there's the suggestion we know what to do. If only we just did it, this would stop. It's not going to stop. Okay, it's not going to stop. It's a very transmissible disease. We don't have a vaccine. As long as people are out there, it's going to continue to pass. Wear a mask if you're in close proximity with others, and that's pretty much it. The hospitals are getting better at this, thank God.
Yes, they are. And the crazy thing was that they were saying, like, you can only protest if it's a Black Lives Matter protest. What about a protest for increasing your immunity? What about a protest for educating people to the techniques and the strategies for increasing your immune system? They're out there, and there's no discussion about this amongst health professionals. Amongst politicians. If you listen to health professionals, people that really understand the human body, they'll tell you there's a lot of strategies. There's a lot of things you could do. First of all, eliminate alcohol, eliminate caffeine, eliminate sugar, eliminate all the bullshit in your diet. Start taking vitamin supplements. Get outside. Get some vitamin D. Get your body healthy. Exercise. Do all these things, and you will increase your immune system. You increase your body's health. You don't hear a word of that. All of it is just stay inside. Lock. We have to stay apart to keep everybody safe. And God damn,
the number one vector for transmission remains the home. Right, that's still the number one vector in every society is the home. People going home and giving it to each other. And when I remember, for me, one of the breaking points in LA was when they decided they were going to shut down all open areas. They're going to shut down all the parks. They're going to shut down all the beaches. And I was like, what is this?
Well, not only that, it goes against science because there's been papers that have been studied that show that this virus dies almost instantaneously when it's exposed to sunlight or even artificial sunlight.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense. But it does feel like, bottom line, there were a bunch of gaps in American society, and then a bad thing happened, and everything just sort of fell apart. It was sort of like a house of cards, and then there's a little bit of weight put right on top of the house of cards, and everything just collapsed in on itself.
Well, people are panicking. They're getting scared, and then the economy's collapsing. So the economy collapsing at the same time as the George Floyd protests led people to start looting. And then people that didn't give a fuck about George Floyd or Black Lives Matter were just stealing shit. And then the police was letting them steal shit. They were standing down in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, literally cops standing there while people were smashing doors.
I got to say, the media coverage of this stuff is just awful. The media were cheering this stuff on. I mean, they were simultaneously making two arguments that conflict with each other. One was, these are mostly peaceful protests. First of all, mostly peaceful is it's the most loosely defined, arbitrarily applied term in history.
Well,
O.J. Simpson was mostly peaceful that night. O.J. Simpson was mostly peaceful that night. For like an hour 15, he was really not peaceful. But for the other hours between sunset and sunrise, he was unbelievably peaceful. Like, I've never heard this term before where a protest turns into a vast riot, wrecking all of Melrose. And everybody's like, well, it was mostly peaceful. Well, what is that? What is that?
True.
So how about this? How about you either say that the protesters and the looters are two different groups of people, and we treat them differently. If you're protesting, that's First Amendment activity. The minute you shatter a store window, you go to jail, right?
Yes,
that's the way this should run.
Agreed.
Or alternatively, if you're saying they're the same group, then they need to be treated as lawbreakers. So I believe the first. I believe if you're a protester, you should be protesting. If you're a looter and a rioter, then you should go to jail. But the media refuse to make that distinction, and then they act like the cops are the bad guys when they come in to arrest people who are violating the law. You're seeing this in Portland right now. They're trying to burn down the damn courthouse.
Yeah.
And the feds come in and start arresting people, and people are like, this is the Gestapo. It's like, okay, speaking as one of the tribe, let me say this is not like the Gestapo. Okay, like the Gestapo was not famous for rolling up on people and then charging them, and then if they didn't have a charge, releasing them. That wasn't like the Gestapo's thing. Like, I'm sorry, but you decided that you wanted to throw a firebomb at the federal courthouse, and your local mayor said he wasn't going to let the police do anything, and so DHS came in and arrested you. Tough shit. I mean, like, I'm sorry, that's at some point somebody's got to restore some semblance of law and order here.
Well, it's a weird situation because I don't exactly understand why they're attacking the courthouse. I don't exactly understand why they're smashing the windows at Amazon Go.
It's Steve Martin, right? They must hate these paint cans, right? Like from the Jerk, right?
But it went from this to literally tear down the structure of society.